Chapter 44. In a 12-step program such as Narcotics Anonymous, people are encouraged to have a sponsor. A sponsor is someone who has been clean for longer than the newcomer has. This person is there to lend support and suggestions and to help the newcomer learn to work the steps of the program and to stay clean. The sponsor relationship puts into practice the idea that one addict can best support another, that the best person to help us recover from our addiction is someone who has been there themselves. This concept has more recently been taken up by the psychiatric recovery movement, expressed in the concept of peer support. Peer support gives voice to the recognition that one psychiatric survivor can best understand and help another. I had a sponsor who would tell me that when an addict is using drugs, they become what she called a shit magnet. I like this phrase. It sums up the endless cycle of crises, problems and drama that become over time a regular feature of an addict's lifestyle. In order to service my ever-expanding cannabis addiction, I hung around some serious players in the cannabis economy, of which there is a large one in New Zealand, and shit seemed to follow us all around. Having to call an ambulance because someone has overdosed, that's shit. Being fingered as the thief of someone else's stash, that's shit. Passing out 5 minutes into the concert you've just paid $100 to see and having to be carried out in front of everyone, that's shit. Giving your infants $5 to go down to the dairy by themselves so that they don't get in the way of the session, that's shit. But this is all totally normal in the life of an addicted drug user. It doesn't matter what the drug is, the behaviours are all variations on the same theme. One of the craziest scenes I remember from my drug-using days illustrates well the insanity of addiction and the lengths that users are prepared to go to in order to obtain their drug. One day myself and 2 other dope fiend friends pulled up at my dealer's house. We'd run out of dope between us and we couldn't handle that. So I'm to go up to the 2nd-story flat and make a quick pickup while my mates wait outside in the car. My dealer friend goes into a room to get our tinnies ready. A tinnie is a standard way of making small, cheap dope purchases. It is a package of tin foil costing $20 or $30, containing enough dope for 2 or 3 joints, depending on the generosity of the dealer. Dealers aren't really known for their selfless giving, however. If you're getting free or cheap drugs from people you hardly know, don't be surprised if sooner or later they want something in return. Anyway, whilst he is away in the other room, one of his paranoid young cohorts who is looking out the window suddenly starts freaking out. "Cops! Cops! The pigs are outside! It looks like they're coming up," he calls out in a panic. "Oh shit," goes everyone else. "There is money and drugs all over the show. This would be a very bad time to be busted." So the dealer came out of the room and slammed the door shut behind him. We all ran to the window to see 2 men in uniforms poking around outside the house. Except they're not cops, they're firemen, and all they're doing is checking the fire hydrant outside. So we heaved a collective sigh of relief, but the tension was heavy and I couldn't wait to get out of there. And that's when the dealer realised that when he slammed the door on the room with all the dope in it, the door locked itself from the inside and there's no key. Well, that was more than he could take. "Just everyone get the fuck out of here," he snapped. "Just forget about it. Come back some other time." So I left them to it. As I departed, they were trying to jimmy the door open, cursing the guy who'd made the mistaken identification. I got back to the car and said, "Just fucking start the car. Go. Let's get out of here." It had felt like a very narrow escape and my nerves were shot. But all my mates could do was crack up laughing. They'd seen the firemen arrive and had been joking that they bet we'd all be freaking out upstairs if we'd seen them. And they go, "But did you get the dope?" And I said, "No, I didn't," and explained to them about it all getting locked in the room. "But let's just go. Everyone's up there in a state and it doesn't feel good. Let's just go and come back later." And in true addict form, they go, "No way. We're not leaving without the dope. Bloody go back and get it." So we ended up having an argument that resulted in us driving around the block a couple of times while they tried to persuade me to go back into the house. This dealer gets very angsty if I take other people there, so sending one of them in instead was not an option. But we just couldn't let it go. We were all hanging out for a smoke, even more so now. So we parked up again outside their house and I went back upstairs. By now the door was off its hinges and everybody was tucking into the merchandise. I got a lecture about bringing mates to the house, even to the driveway, but I finally left with the weed, transaction completed, another deal done, another day escaping arrest, and the tinnies would all be smoked by tomorrow. Then we'd scratch around for more money and go back and do it all over again. That's the insanity of addiction. It was commonplace that we would visit drug dealers, sometimes 2 or 3 times in a week. We didn't usually have the cash to buy in larger quantities, and if we did, we just smoked more anyway, so it never lasted long. This was definitely not a spiritually or psychologically healthy way to live, and everyone in the above story, with the probable exception of the fireman, were very messed up individuals with poor mental health, several with psychiatric diagnoses, taking medication, and who could best be described as edgy, to say the least. Another product that these particular dealers supplied was cannabis oil. They made it and sold it on the premises. One cap, which is one of those pull-apart pill capsules filled with the tar-like oil, cost $30, and it was a cheap way of buying dope, as it is highly concentrated and you could eke it out. I don't know too much about the manufacture of it, except that it involves a distilling process, usually of poorer quality cannabis, mixed with a variety of toxic chemicals, such as isopropyl alcohol, and who knows what other household poisons. I've heard of ingredients such as shoe polish being added to thin it out for sale, and then you smoke it. There are several ways to do this. The method we used a lot, and possibly will live to regret, is to smear a blob on a piece of aluminium tinfoil, heating the foil from underneath with a lighter and inhaling the acrid smoke and lighter fluid as the oil heats and burns. Alzheimer's, here we come. At the time we didn't care. After all, there was no future, no old age, only the urgent now of the cannabis cravings. I did whatever was necessary to get the drugs I needed. I lied, I used people, I hung around with criminals. I went to places I never would have gone if it weren't for the drugs. For a time I procured dope through some friends of mine who worshipped Satan. Pumped up on the works of Aleister Crowley and a head full of drugs, they got wasted and desecrated graveyards and called up spirits with their Ouija board for entertainment. Another dealer I frequented for a time was holed up in a permanent state of paranoia, his house being used for the manufacture and supply of cannabis oil. The house was Spartan, except for the manufacturing equipment and the security paraphernalia. Aggressive dogs strained at their leashes and police radio scanners crackled so his runners could know in advance if they were likely to be pulled up by police whilst out on delivery. If my local sources ran dry, I was known to make the 6-hour drive to Christchurch to get supplies. My life and thinking had become totally centred in the getting and using of cannabis, and there is no person more self-centred and spiritually bereft than an addict who needs their fix. Couple this existence with my simultaneous pretences at living the straight life, where I would become whoever I thought you wanted me to be in order to maintain the required impression. The longer I maintained the ruse, the further I got away from any sense of who I was as a human being. I could say that addiction led me to become someone I wasn't, but of course I was for that time, and that was the problem. I didn't know anything about anything spiritual, except of course for my illusion that I and my wise friends were deeply connected to the mystical realm because we smoked lots of dope and dwelt in a permanent haze. But that was rubbish, it wasn't real. Dope didn't fill the void, it deepened it. I'd certainly never felt any relationship with a god. I doubted there was such a thing. I wasn't at all religious, in fact I was a noisy atheist. The only spiritual element in my life was an abiding reverence for the music of Bob Marley. Something deep and inexpressible within me resonated with Bob's lyrics and the message that sprung from his connection to his Rastafarian god, Jah. I innately understood his references to I, describing his god as a living spiritual entity that walked as one with him. So when I, at the complete end of my rope, called out into the unknown, it was for Jah. because if Bob knew him, he must be okay. Maybe I too had an I. So that night, back in the darkness of 1992, I lay curled up on the floor with my head in my hands and spoke the prayer of desperation uttered by many an addict and alcoholic who have hit the bottom. Substitute Jah for any one of the myriad of called upon personas of God. I said, Jah, if you are really out there, you've got to help me. I promise I'll do whatever you want, just get me out of this mess. And the rest is history. Within days, I'd discovered the truth about my life, the real story behind the state I was in, and I couldn't sort it out on my own, no matter how much I would go on to try.